The snow bit through my thin coat like teeth. Each step sent ice water seeping through the holes in my boots, numbing my feet until I could barely feel them anymore. The Northern Ridge Pack had cast me out 3 hours ago, and already the cold was trying to finish what their cruelty had started. Omega. Worthless. Burden. The words still rang in my ears, spoken by the Alpha who had promised my dying mother he would protect me. 16 years of scrubbing floors, of eating scraps, of sleeping in the cellar with the rats. And when I finally turned 21, when I was supposed to present and find my place in the pack, nothing happened. No wolf emerged. No shift. No power. Defective, they called me. Broken Omega with no wolf. Not even worth keeping as a servant anymore. So they drove me into the Deadlands. The frozen wasteland between territories where nothing survived, where unwanted wolves were sent to die. I stumbled over a snow-buried root and fell hard, my palms scraping against ice. The cold burned worse than fire. I lay there for a moment, watching my breath form weak clouds in the darkness, wondering if I should just stop. Just close my eyes and let the snow take me. It would be easier than walking, easier than hoping. Then I heard it. A sound so faint I almost missed it beneath the howling wind. A whimper, thin and reedy and desperate. I lifted my head, scanning the white emptiness around me. Nothing but snow and darkness and the skeletal shapes of dead trees. But there it was again. That tiny, terrible sound. Something was crying. I pushed myself up, my frozen fingers screaming in protest. The sound was coming from somewhere to my left, near a cluster of ice-covered boulders. I staggered toward it, each step an act of will. The wind tried to push me back, tried to bury me, but that sound kept pulling me forward. And then I saw it. A bundle of dark fur against the white snow, so small it could have been a rabbit. But it wasn't a rabbit. It was a pup. A tiny, newborn pup with silver-white fur matted with blood and ice. Its eyes were closed, its body barely moving except for the faint rise and fall of its chest. Someone had left it here to die. I fell to my knees beside it, my hands hovering over the tiny form. It was so cold, so still. The snow around it was stained pink with blood, and I could see now that it had been wrapped in something once, fine fabric that had been torn away by the wind or by animals. The pup whimpered again, and the sound cracked something open in my chest. I didn't think. I just acted. I pulled off my coat, my body screaming as the full force of the cold hit me, and I wrapped it around the tiny creature. I pressed it against my chest, trying to share whatever warmth I had left. The moment its skin touched mine, the world exploded. Pain seared across the left side of my neck like a brand pressed to flesh. I screamed, the sound ripping from my throat as white-hot agony consumed me. My vision went black, then white, then filled with images I didn't understand. A massive wolf with fur like midnight and eyes like molten gold. A throne of bones and ice. A kingdom of shadows and snow. And a voice, deep and ancient and terrible. Mine. The pain stopped as suddenly as it had started. I was on my back in the snow, gasping. The pup clutched against my chest. My neck throbbed with a strange heat, and when I touched it with trembling fingers, I felt something there. something raised and warm against my frozen skin. A mark, burned into my flesh. The pup stirred against me, its tiny mouth opening in a silent cry. And I understood, with a certainty that made no sense, that this was not just any pup. This was the child of the Alpha King of the Shadow Realm, and I had just been branded as his mate. I ran, not away from the pup, but toward shelter, toward survival. The mark on my neck pulsed with warmth that spread through my body like liquid fire, pushing back the cold that had been killing me moments before. My legs moved faster than they should have. My eyes saw clearer in the darkness. Something had awakened inside me, something that had been sleeping for 21 years. My wolf. She unfurled in my chest like a flower blooming in winter, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. I felt strong. I felt like I was supposed to be here, in this moment, carrying this dying pup through the frozen wasteland. I found a cave half buried in snow. Not much, just a hollow in the rock face that blocked the worst of the wind. I crawled inside, pressing myself into the farthest corner, the pup tucked beneath my coat against my bare skin. Its breathing was so weak, so fragile. I didn't know how to help a dying pup. I didn't know anything about pups at all. But the mark on my neck burned hotter, and instinct took over. I pressed my wrist to its tiny mouth, and something sharp and impossible happened. The pup bit down. Pain, but not like before. This was different. This was a connection forming, a bond snapping into place like a key turning in a lock. The pup drank, and color returned to its silver fur. Its breathing steadied. Its tiny paws flexed against my arm. I was feeding it. Somehow, impossibly, I was feeding it with my own blood, and we were both surviving. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Hours, maybe. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, wrapped in my coat and my arms and whatever strange magic the mark had given me, the pup grew stronger. When dawn finally broke through the storm clouds, weak gray light filtering into the cave, the pup opened its eyes for the first time. They were gold. Pure, molten gold. Ancient and knowing in a face barely hours old. And I understood that whatever was coming, whatever this mark meant, I would protect this child with my life. Had finally found something worth fighting for. The Shadow Realm soldiers found me 2 days later. I had made it out of the Deadlands somehow, the mark guiding me like a compass pointing toward something I couldn't see. The pup, who I had started calling Ash in my head because of the silver gray of his fur, had grown stronger with each passing hour. He still needed my blood to survive, but less now. He was healing, thriving even. I was walking through a forest of black pines when they surrounded me. 12 wolves in dark armor, their faces hidden behind helmets shaped like snarling beasts. They moved like shadows, silent and deadly. And before I could run, they had formed a circle around me with weapons drawn. One of them stepped forward. Taller than the others, broader, with a voice like gravel and smoke. "The mark," he said. "Show me your neck." My hand flew to cover it instinctively, and Ash whimpered against my chest, sensing my fear. I said, "Show me." Something in his voice made my legs want to buckle. Alpha command, strong enough to make my newly awakened wolf want to submit. But the mark flared hot. Instead of obeying, I found myself standing straighter. No. The word came out clear and steady, surprising us both. The soldier went still. Then, slowly, he removed his helmet. He was younger than I expected. Maybe 30, with sharp features and pale eyes that looked almost silver in the morning light. A scar ran from his temple to his jaw, and when he looked at me, something flickered across his face, something like shock. "That's impossible," he breathed. "You're human." "I'm Omega." No Omega could resist a direct command from the king's first guard. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on my neck. "What are you?" Before I could answer, Ash squirmed out of my coat and tumbled into view. The soldiers gasped, several of them dropping to their knees immediately. The first guard, the one who had been questioning me, went completely white. "The prince," he whispered. "By the Moon Mother, that's the lost prince." The lost prince. The words echoed in the sudden silence of the forest. The soldiers who had dropped to their knees pressed their foreheads to the frozen ground. Even the first guard bowed his head, though his eyes never left the pup, never left Ash. "He was taken 3 nights ago," the first guard said, his voice rough with emotion. "The queen gave birth during the lunar eclipse. An hour later, both she and the prince vanished. We found her body at the border of the Deadlands, torn apart by rogues. The prince was gone. We thought, we assumed—" He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. They had assumed the baby was dead. That whoever killed the queen had killed her son as well. "I found him in the snow," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Distant. He was dying. I picked him up and the mark just appeared, and I didn't know what was happening, but I couldn't leave him there. I couldn't. The mark. The first guard's eyes moved to my neck, and something dark passed over his face. The king's mate mark, burned into a stranger's flesh. He will want to see this himself. I didn't ask for it. I didn't do anything. It just happened. I know. He straightened, and when he looked at me now, there was something almost like pity in his pale eyes. That's what I'm afraid of. They brought me to the Shadow Realm's capital on horseback. Ash clutched in my arms the entire way. The soldiers rode in formation around me, protecting me or imprisoning me, I couldn't tell which. The first guard, whose name I learned was Ethan, rode beside me in silence. The capital city rose from the mountains like a dark dream, spires of black stone reaching toward the gray sky, walls carved from the mountain itself, ancient and imposing. Flags bearing a silver wolf sigil snapped in the wind. It was beautiful and terrible, and nothing like anything I had ever seen. But it was the castle that stole my breath. It sat at the heart of the city, a fortress of obsidian and shadow that seemed to drink the light. Torches burned in brackets along the walls, their flames blue instead of orange. The gates were made of some dark metal that shimmered like oil on water, and they opened without anyone touching them as we approached. Magic. Real magic. The kind I had only heard about in stories. We rode through the gates and into a courtyard filled with people. Soldiers, servants, nobles in fine clothing who all stopped what they were doing to stare. I could feel their eyes on me, on the mark that pulsed visibly on my neck, on the sleeping prince in my arms. And then I felt something else. A presence. Massive and overwhelming, pressing against my consciousness like a wave about to crash. My wolf, so newly awakened, tried to curl into herself, tried to hide, but there was nowhere to go. He was here. The crowd parted, and I saw him for the first time. The Alpha King of the Shadow Realm was exactly what I had seen in my vision, and yet so much more. He was impossibly tall, towering over even his tallest guards. His shoulders were broad enough to block out the gray sky. His face was carved from angles and shadows, high cheekbones and a jaw that could have been chiseled from stone. His hair was black as midnight, falling past his shoulders in waves. And his eyes. His eyes were molten gold, ancient and burning, fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart stop. He moved toward me, and the crowd held its breath. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but watch as he approached, his boots silent on the cobblestones, his presence filling every inch of the courtyard until there was nothing else in the world but him. He stopped in front of my horse, and I had to tilt my head back to look at him. He was even taller up close, even more devastating, even more terrifying. "Show me the child." His voice. I had heard it in my vision, but that was nothing compared to the reality. It was deep and dark and resonated in my bones. It made something in me want to kneel, want to submit, want to do anything he asked. But I also felt a flicker of something else. Defiance. "Mine," my wolf whispered, and I didn't know if she meant him or the child or both. I pulled back the edge of my coat, revealing Ash's sleeping face. The Alpha King went completely still. For a long moment, he just stared at his son, at the child he had thought was dead. Then his eyes moved to my neck, to the mark that was burning hotter now, reacting to his presence. His nostrils flared, his pupils dilated, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "That's impossible. That's what everyone keeps saying." The words were out before I could stop them. Stupid. Reckless. You don't talk back to an Alpha King who could kill you with a single word. But he didn't kill me. He didn't even look angry. He looked lost, shattered, like everything he thought he knew had just crumbled to dust. "Take her to the East Wing," he said finally, his voice flat and controlled. "The prince will have a nurse. She will be examined by the healers." "My king," Ethan started. "The mark, we should discuss what this means." "I know what it means." The Alpha King's eyes never left mine. Gold burning into brown. Power meeting power. It means the Moon Mother has a twisted sense of humor. Put her in the East Wing. No one touches her. No one speaks to her, not until I decide what to do with her. He turned and walked away without another word. I watched him go, my heart hammering, the mark on my neck burning like a brand. I didn't know then that he had watched me too. From the shadows of the gate, from the moment I rode into the courtyard until the moment I was led inside. I didn't know he had seen everything, and I didn't know that he had already started to wonder if the broken Omega who had saved his son might be exactly what he needed. 3 days in the East Wing, and I had learned several things. First, the Shadow Realm's castle was enormous. My chamber alone was bigger than the entire cellar I had slept in it for 16 years. A massive bed with fur blankets piled so high I could barely see over them. A fireplace that never seemed to go out. A bathing room with heated water that came from the walls. Second, I was a prisoner in everything but name. Guards stood outside my door. Servants brought my meals but wouldn't speak to me. The healer who examined me did so in complete silence, her face blank and her touch clinical. Third, Ash had been taken from me. That was the worst part. They had come for him within hours of my arrival, a stern woman in gray robes who said she was the royal nurse. She had lifted him from my arms while I was too exhausted to fight, and when I tried to follow, the guards blocked my way. I could still feel him. That was the strangest thing. The bond we had formed in the cave was still there, a thread of connection that told me he was alive, that he was close, that he was growing stronger. But I couldn't see him, couldn't hold him, couldn't make sure he was safe. The mark burned constantly now, a low heat that never faded. Sometimes it pulsed, and I would feel something through it. Emotions that weren't mine. Rage, grief, confusion. Once, in the middle of the night, a wave of loneliness so profound it brought tears to my eyes. The king. I was feeling the king. On the 4th day, she came. I was sitting by the window, watching snow fall over the mountains, when my chamber door opened without a knock. I turned, expecting a servant with my evening meal, and found instead the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She was tall and willowy, with silver blonde hair that fell to her waist and eyes the color of glacial ice. Her gown was deep blue velvet trimmed with white fur, and jewels glittered at her throat and wrists. She moved like water, graceful and cold, and when she looked at me, her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So," she said, her voice musical and sharp, "you're the little stray who crawled out of the snow with my nephew in her arms." Nephew? This was the king's sister. "I'm Seren," I said, because I had been raised to be polite even to people who looked at me like I was something they had stepped in. "I know who you are." She moved into the room, her eyes scanning everything as if cataloging it for later. "Sir, no pack name, no family, no wolf until 4 days ago. An omega so defective your own pack threw you out to die." Each word was a knife, precise and deliberate. "And yet somehow," she continued, circling me now like a predator, "you managed to survive the Deadlands, to find the lost prince, to form a blood bond with a royal child, and to receive the king's mate mark, all in one night." She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and toxic. "Do you expect me to believe that's a coincidence?" "I don't expect you to believe anything." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I don't know why any of this happened. I just know it did." "Convenient." Her smile widened, showing too many teeth. "The perfect story. The perfect victim. The Omega who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Who just happened to save the heir. Who just happened to become bonded to my brother. Brother, not nephew. The king's sister, then. Which meant Ash was her nephew. Are you accusing me of something?" I'm accusing you of everything." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I know there are factions in this realm who would do anything to control my brother. Desperate measures for desperate times. Plant a fake mate. Use an orphan nobody would miss. Wait for the perfect moment. I didn't know the prince existed until I found him dying in the snow. So you say. It's the truth." "Truth." She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Truth is whatever the powerful decide it is. And you have no power here, little Omega. You are nothing, less than nothing. A defective stray with a stolen mark on her neck." The mark flared hot, and something in me snapped. "The mark isn't stolen," I heard myself say. "It chose me. I don't know why. I don't know how. But I felt it happen. I felt him. And whatever you think of me, whatever you're planning, it won't change what the Moon Mother decided." For a moment, something flickered in her icy eyes. Fear, maybe, or respect, or both. Then her expression hardened again. "We'll see about that," she said. "Enjoy your comfortable cage, little Omega. It won't last." She swept out of the room, her skirts trailing behind her like a frozen wave. I stood there long after she was gone, my heart pounding, the mark burning on my neck. I had made an enemy, a powerful one, and I had no idea how to fight her. But I knew one thing for certain. I would not let her take Ash from me again. The king came to me that night. I was sleeping, lost in dreams of snow and blood and golden eyes, when I felt it. A presence in the room. A weight at the edge of my consciousness that made my wolf raise her head and whine. I opened my eyes to darkness. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. And there, standing at the foot of my bed, was the Alpha King. He was watching me. I sat up slowly, pulling the furs around myself. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there in the darkness, his eyes glowing faintly gold, his presence filling the room like smoke. "How long have you been there?" I asked. "Long enough." His voice was different than it had been in the courtyard, rougher, more raw, the voice of a man who had forgotten how to be anything but a king. "Long enough for what?" "To know you dream of my son." He moved closer, and even in the darkness I could see the tension in his shoulders, the exhaustion in his face. "You saved him, blood bonded with him, fed him from your own veins when he was dying." "Yes." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise him, as much as it surprised me, like he hadn't meant to ask it, like it had torn itself free without permission. "Because he was dying," I said. "Because someone left him to die in the snow, and I found him, and I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't let him die alone. You were dying too. The Deadlands have killed wolves far stronger than you." "I know." "Then why?" He was at the edge of the bed now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. For someone whose realm was called Shadow, he burned like the sun. "Why risk your life for a child you didn't know? Why save him when saving yourself would have been smarter?" "Because." I met his golden eyes, and something passed between us. Something electric. Something that made the mark on my neck flare and his breath catch. Because some things are more important than being smart. Because when I held him, I knew. I knew he was meant to survive. I knew I was meant to find him. I knew that if I let him die, I would never forgive myself. And I'm already carrying so many things I can't forgive. I couldn't add his death to the list. Silence. Long and heavy. Then the Alpha King did something I never expected. He knelt. He knelt at the edge of my bed, this massive, powerful, terrifying creature, and he bowed his head. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for keeping him alive when I couldn't, when I failed him, when I failed his mother. You didn't fail anyone. I was supposed to protect them." His hands were fists against his thighs, knuckles white. She was my mate, the true one, the one the Moon Mother chose for me 20 years ago, and I couldn't keep her safe. I couldn't stop them from taking her, taking him. "Who?" I asked softly. "Who took them?" He looked up at me then, and his eyes were wet. The Alpha King of the Shadow Realm, crying in the darkness of my chamber. "I don't know," he said. "That's the worst part. I don't know who killed her. I don't know who tried to kill my son. They could be anyone. Anyone in my court, my council, my own guard. And until I find them, until I tear out their throats with my own teeth, my son is not safe." "Then let me help." The word came from somewhere deep inside me, somewhere that had been sleeping until 4 days ago. "Let me protect him. Let me help you find whoever did this. The mark, the bond, they mean something. I can feel him, your son. I know when he's happy, when he's scared, when he's hungry. I can protect him in ways your guards can't. You don't know what you're offering? Then tell me." He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "The mark means you're mine," he said, and the word sent shivers down my spine. "Not in the way you might think, not yet, but in the eyes of my people you are the king's chosen. If you stand with me, you become a target. Everyone who wants to hurt me will try to hurt you first. They already want to hurt me. Your sister made that very clear." Something dark flickered across his face. "Celine came to see you. She accused me of being a spy, of orchestrating the whole thing, of being planted here by your enemies." "And did you?" "Did I orchestrate finding a dying baby in a snowstorm while I was dying myself?" He almost smiled. Almost. "When you put it that way. I'm not a spy. I'm not a plant. I'm just an Omega who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or the right place. I haven't decided yet. Neither have I." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Tomorrow you will be presented to the court. They will expect explanations. They will expect me to claim you or reject you publicly, to acknowledge the mark or deny it." "What will you do?" He looked back at me over his shoulder, and in the firelight he looked less like a king and more like a man. A grieving, exhausted, desperate man. "I will do whatever I have to do to keep my son alive," he said, "even if it means binding myself to a woman I barely know. Even if it means giving you a power you never asked for. Even if it means making enemies of everyone who thought they could control me." He opened the door. "Sleep well, little Omega. Tomorrow, everything changes." The great hall of the Shadow Realm was carved from black marble shot through with veins of silver. Columns rose to a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Torches burned with that same blue fire, casting everything in shades of cold and shadow. And at the far end, on a dais of obsidian steps, sat the throne of bones. It was exactly what it sounded like. A massive seat built from the bones of ancient creatures, wolves and bears and things that had no names anymore. The Alpha King sat upon it like he had been born there, his black clothing stark against the pale bones, his golden eyes burning in his angular face. I stood at the entrance, flanked by guards, wearing a gown that had appeared in my chamber that morning. Black silk that clung to my body like water, trimmed with silver thread that caught the light. My hair had been braided with tiny crystals. My neck had been left bare. The mark was visible to everyone. The court filled the hall on either side. Nobles in fine clothing, warriors in ceremonial armor, advisors in robes of gray and silver. They all stared at me as I walked down the center aisle, some with curiosity, some with disgust, some with barely concealed fear. And there, standing at the base of the throne beside a cradle I recognized, was Celine. She smiled when she saw me. That cold, beautiful, terrible smile. "The court welcomes Seren," she announced, her voice carrying through the hall. "Omega of the Northern Ridge Pack, or should I say former Omega, since her pack cast her out to die for the crime of being defective." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She claims," Celine continued, "to have found the lost prince in the Deadlands, to have saved his life through a blood bond, and to have received the king's mate mark, all in one night, all completely by accident." More murmurs. Louder now. Suspicious. "I put it to this court," Selene said, turning to face the assembled nobles, "that such a series of coincidences strains belief. That this Omega, this defective, packless nobody, has been planted here by our enemies. That the mark on her neck is a fake, created through dark magic. That the blood bond is a manipulation, designed to give her access to the prince." "And your evidence?" I heard myself ask. The hall went silent. Selene's eyes snapped to mine, icy and furious. "Excuse me!" "Your evidence." I moved forward, my legs steadier than they had any right to be. "You've made accusations. Where is your proof? Where are your witnesses? Where is anything beyond your suspicion and your bile? How dare you?" Celine stepped toward me, her face twisted with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that, you worthless?" "Enough." One word from the throne, and Celine froze. The entire court froze. Even I felt the weight of it pressing down on my shoulders like a physical force. The Alpha King rose from his throne. He moved down the steps slowly, deliberately, each footfall echoing in the silence. He passed Selena without looking at her. He stopped in front of me. "Show them the mark," he said quietly. I turned my head, exposing the left side of my neck. The mark pulsed with warmth, visible to everyone. A perfect wolf's bite, branded into my skin in silver-white lines. "This mark," the king said, his voice carrying through the hall, "is not fake. It cannot be faked. It is the mate mark of the Shadow Realm's royal bloodline, passed down through 100 generations of kings. It appears only when the Moon Mother chooses a true mate." "But she's human," someone called out. An omega without a wolf. She has a wolf now. The king turned to face the court. Awakened the moment she touched my son. Awakened because the Moon Mother decided it was time. I do not question the Moon Mother's decisions. Neither should any of you. Celine stepped forward. Brother, you cannot seriously mean to acknowledge her. She's nothing. A nobody. The court will never. The court will do as I command. His voice was ice. As they have always done. As they will always do. Or would you like to challenge me, sister? Would you like to test whether your ambitions are stronger than my patience? Silence. Absolute silence. Then the king did something that made the entire court gasp. He took my hand. His fingers were warm against mine, and where our skin touched, the mark blazed with heat. I felt it through the bond, through the connection that had been growing stronger every day. His certainty, his determination, his complete and utter refusal to let anyone take this from him. This woman saved my son's life, he announced to the court. She risked her own death to keep him alive. She fed him from her own veins when no other sustenance would work, and the Moon Mother herself has marked her as mine. He lifted our joined hands. From this moment forward, she is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who harms her will answer to me personally, and anyone who questions the mark on her neck questions the Moon Mother herself. His eyes swept the hall, landing on Celine. Am I understood? One by one, the nobles dropped to their knees. The warriors bowed their heads. Even the advisors, ancient and powerful as they were, showed their throats in submission. Only Celine remained standing. Her face was a mask of fury, her hands clenched at her sides. You'll regret this, she said, quiet enough that only we could hear. Both of you will regret this. Then she sank into a curtsy, her eyes burning with hatred. The king turned to me, and for just a moment, something warm flickered in his golden gaze. Welcome to the Shadow Realm, he said. Little Omega. The months that followed were the strangest of my life. I was moved to chambers closer to the king's quarters. I was given servants who actually spoke to me, guards who actually protected me, and access to the royal nursery where Ash grew stronger every day. I was trained in court protocol, taught the history of the realm, introduced to the complexities of politics I had never known existed. And slowly, day by day, I fell in love. Not with the king, not yet, but with his son. Ash was a miracle. In the 2 months since I had found him, he had grown from a dying newborn into a bright, curious pup, who shifted between human and wolf forms without warning. His silver fur was soft as clouds. His golden eyes were exact copies of his father's, and when he saw me each morning, his entire face would light up. Mama, he called me. Not out loud, he wasn't talking yet, but through our bond. A warmth and recognition that meant mother in every language. I should have corrected him, should have reminded him that I wasn't his mother, but I couldn't. Every time I tried, the word stuck in my throat, because the truth was, I felt like his mother. I had saved him, fed him, kept him alive when no one else could. The bond between us was real as any blood connection, and I would kill anyone who tried to take him from me. You're good with him. I looked up from the nursery floor where Ash and I had been playing with wooden blocks. The king stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. "He's easy to be good with," I said. "He's perfect." "He's not perfect." The king moved into the room, lowering himself to the floor beside us with a grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone so large. His left leg is shorter than his right. The healers say it happened during the birth. He may never run as fast as other wolves. I looked at Ash, who was gnawing happily on a block. At his tiny legs, one just slightly different from the other. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't cared. "So what?" I said. "Plenty of wolves are different. Different doesn't mean broken." "That's not what my court thinks." "Your court can choke on its opinions." The king laughed. Actually laughed. A rough, surprised sound that transformed his face from stone to something almost human. "Moon Mother, where did they find you?" "Dying in a snowstorm. Remember?" "I remember everything." His voice had gone quiet, intense. "I remember watching you ride into my courtyard. I remember the way you held my son like he was the most precious thing in the world. I remember the mark on your neck burning bright enough to blind anyone who looked at it. It does that. Only when I'm near." He reached out, and his fingers brushed the mark. Heat exploded through me, warm and electric, and I gasped without meaning to. "It's getting stronger. The bond between us." "I know. Do you know what that means?" I met his eyes. Gold on brown. King and Omega. Predator and prey. "It means you're mine," I whispered. "And I'm yours." Something snapped in him. I saw it happen. The control he had been holding, the distance he had been keeping, it shattered like glass. He kissed me. His mouth was hot against mine, demanding and desperate, and I opened for him without thought. His hand fisted in my hair, tilting my head back. His tongue swept against mine. The mark on my neck blazed so bright I could see it through my closed eyelids. When he finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "Seren," he said, and my name on his lips was prayer and curse and promise. Kalen. The first time I had ever used his name, the first time I had ever dared. "I need to tell you something." His forehead pressed against mine. "Something I should have told you weeks ago." "Then tell me." "I know who killed my mate, who tried to kill my son." My blood went cold. "Who?" His eyes met mine, and I saw the pain there, the rage, the terrible, destroying grief. "Celine," he said, "my own sister." Everything made sense suddenly. Her hatred of me, her accusations, her desperate attempts to turn the court against me. If she had killed the queen to take her place, if she had tried to kill the prince to eliminate the heir, then I was the worst thing that could have happened to her. A witness, a threat. A woman the king was falling for who could destroy all her plans. "How long have you known?" I suspected from the beginning. She was the only one who had access to my mate's chambers, the only one who knew about the secret passage the queen used to escape. But I had no proof, no witnesses. And now? Now I have a spy in her inner circle, one of the women she trusts. She's been gathering evidence for months, and 3 nights from now, at the winter solstice ball, We're going to expose her in front of the entire court. 3 nights. I looked at Ash, who had fallen asleep with a block still clutched in his tiny fist. And until then, you stay close to me. Kalen cupped my face in his hands. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't trust anyone I haven't personally vetted. And you remember that whatever happens, whatever she tries, I will burn this entire realm to the ground before I let her hurt you or my son. I believed him. Every word. What do you need me to do? Just survive, he said. Just keep breathing until this is over. Can you do that? I've been surviving my whole life. I kissed him, soft and brief. I can survive 3 more days. I was wrong. Celine moved first. 2 nights before the solstice ball, I woke to smoke. The east wing was burning, blue flames climbing the walls, spreading faster than any natural fire should. I barely had time to grab a robe before the door burst open and guards were dragging me into the corridor. "The prince!" I screamed. "Where's Ash?" "The nursery is on the other side of the castle, my lady. The fire hasn't reached." But it had. I could feel it through the bond. Ash's terror, his confusion, the smoke filling his lungs. I ran. I don't know how I moved so fast. One moment I was in the East Wing corridor. The next I was somehow in the Royal Wing, my legs carrying me faster than any Omega should be able to move. The mark on my neck burned like a brand, guiding me, pushing me forward. The nursery door was locked from the outside. I threw myself against it, once, twice, 3 times. My shoulders screamed in protest. The wood didn't budge. Ash's fear flooded through me. He was choking, dying. Something inside me broke. I shifted. For the first time in my life, I shifted into my wolf form. It happened without warning, without thought, pure instinct taking over. My body twisted, reformed, and suddenly I was on 4 legs, larger than I should have been. My fur silver white like ashes. I threw myself at the door as a wolf, and it shattered. Ash was in his crib, surrounded by smoke, barely breathing. I shifted back to human, grabbed him, and ran. I made it to the courtyard before I collapsed. Kalen was there in seconds, appearing out of the chaos like a shadow made flesh. He took Ash from my arms, checking him frantically, then passed him to a healer before dropping to his knees beside me. Saren, look at me!" I tried. My vision was blurring. My lungs burned from the smoke. "Found her," I mumbled. "Near the nursery. She was there, watching." Who was there? Celine. I coughed, tasting blood. She started the fire, tried to kill him, kill us both. Kalen's face transformed into something terrifying, something inhuman. "Where is she?" His voice was barely recognizable. "Where is my sister?" Ran. When I shifted, she wasn't expecting me to. To what? To fight. I smiled, tasting copper on my lips. I fought. Then everything went black. I woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, warm and golden, streaming through windows I didn't recognize. I was in a different chamber, a much larger one, with fur blankets piled around me and a fire crackling in an enormous hearth. And Kalen was beside me, his hand wrapped around mine, his head bowed as if in prayer. "Kalen!" His head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. His hair hung loose around his face. "You're awake." He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. "Thank the Moon Mother. Thank every god that ever existed. You're awake." "Ash?" I croaked. "Is Ash?" "He's fine. The healers say you got to him in time. You saved him again." He pulled back, cupping my face. "You shifted. You weren't supposed to be able to shift for months yet, and you shifted to save my son." I didn't think about it. I just did it. I know. That's what terrifies me. "And Celine?" His expression hardened. "Captured. Trying to flee through the Eastern Pass. My guards brought her back in chains this morning." "What happens now?" "Now." He kissed my forehead, gentle despite the fury I could feel through our bond. "Now we end this." The great hall was packed with every noble, every warrior, every servant in the realm. They stood shoulder to shoulder, filling the space until there was barely room to breathe. At the center, chained to a post of black iron, was Celine. She looked nothing like the beautiful, terrible woman who had threatened me in my chamber. Her hair hung lank around her face. Her fine gown was torn and dirty, and her eyes, those icy blue eyes that had promised me so much suffering, were wild with fear. I stood beside Kalen's throne, Ash cradled in my arms. The mark on my neck glowed steady and bright. "Celine of the Shadow Realm," Kalen announced, his voice carrying through the hall. "You are charged with the murder of Queen Liana, with the attempted murder of Prince Asher, with conspiracy to seize the throne, and with treason against your king and your realm." "This is madness," Selena screamed. "I am your sister, your blood. You would take the word of this Omega, this defective stray, over your own family?" "I would take the word of my mate," Kalen said quietly, "and I would take the evidence my spies have gathered. The letters you wrote to the northern rebels, the poison you purchased from the witches, the confession of Mrs. Halloway, who you threatened with the life of her son to gain access to my mate's chambers." A woman stepped forward from the crowd. The same stern nurse who had taken Ash from me on my first day in the castle. She was crying. "It's true," she said. "Lady Celine took my son. She said she would kill him if I didn't help her. I didn't want to. Moon Mother, I never wanted any of this." "Lies," Celine thrashed against her chains. "All lies. This is a conspiracy. She's turned you all against me." "No." Kalen stood from his throne. "You turned yourself against everyone. You killed your own queen because you wanted her crown. You tried to kill your own nephew because you wanted the throne. And you would have burned this entire realm down if it meant you could rule over the ashes." He walked toward her, and the crowd parted before him like water. "But you failed," he said, stopping in front of her. "You failed because a dying Omega in a snowstorm had more courage, more love, more honor than you have ever possessed. She saved what you tried to destroy, and now she will watch you die." Celine's eyes found mine. There was no remorse in them, no regret, only hatred, pure and bottomless. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Kill me, and my allies will." "Your allies are dead." Kalen's voice was flat. "Every noble who conspired with you, every guard who took your bribes, every servant who helped you, they were executed this morning. You are the last. For the first time, real fear flickered across Celine's face. Brother, she whispered, please. We are blood. We are family. You stopped being my family the moment you killed my mate. Kaylin's hand closed around her throat. And I have a new family now. He shifted. It happened faster than I could follow. One moment he was a man, the next he was a wolf, massive and black, bigger than any wolf I had ever seen. His jaws opened wide, and before Celine could scream, his teeth closed around her neck. The sound was terrible. The sight was worse. But I didn't look away. Some monsters deserved to die. When it was over, when Celine's body lay still on the marble floor, Kaylin shifted back. He turned to face the court, blood staining his mouth, his eyes burning gold. Does anyone else wish to challenge my mate? He asked quietly. Anyone else wish to threaten my son? Silence. Absolute silence. Then, one by one, every person in the hall dropped to their knees. Kaylin walked back to me, to the throne where I stood with his son in my arms. He took my hand and turned to face his people. This is your queen, he announced, serene of the shadow realm, mate of the king, mother of the prince. Anyone who questions her questions me. Anyone who doubts her doubts the Moon Mother herself. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw everything. Love, devotion, a forever that stretched beyond death. Mine, he said, quiet enough that only I could hear. Yours, I whispered back. And somewhere in my arms, Ash smiled. 1 year later. The nursery was filled with morning light, golden rays streaming through windows that had once been shrouded in shadow. I sat in a rocking chair, Ash in my lap, a picture book open between us. He was walking now, talking, too, simple words that made my heart burst every time I heard them. His left leg was different, yes, shorter than his right, but he ran anyway. He climbed anyway. He lived anyway. Mama, he said, pointing at a picture of a wolf. Wolf. Yes, baby, that's a wolf. Like Dada. Like Dada. And like you. He grinned, showing tiny fangs that had just started to come in. Then he slid off my lap and toddled toward the door, where a familiar figure stood watching. Dada. Kaylin scooped him up, holding him close. Good morning, little wolf. Did you sleep well? Ash nodded seriously. Mama read story. She did? Kaylin looked at me over our one's head, and his smile was soft, warm. Nothing like the cold king who had terrified me a year ago. What story? Wolf story. Wolf finds baby. Wolf saves baby. Wolf becomes mama. That's a good story. Kaylin set him down, and Ash immediately ran to the toy corner. A very good story. He crossed to me, pulling me up from the chair and into his arms. The mark on my neck warmed at his touch, the same way it did every time we were close. You told him about how we found him? The simplified version. He asked where he came from. I rested my head against his chest. I couldn't lie to him. You could have. I wouldn't have blamed you. I know, but he deserves the truth. All of it. When he's old enough. Kaylin was quiet for a moment. Then he tilted my chin up, making me meet his eyes. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Finding him, taking the mark, binding yourself to this realm. To me? Never." I said it without hesitation because it was true. You're my family, both of you. I spent my whole life being told I was worthless, defective, broken, and then I found a dying baby in the snow, and everything changed. The Moon Mother chose you. Maybe. Or maybe I chose myself. Maybe I finally decided I was worth saving. I smiled, along with a very stubborn pup who wouldn't stop crying. He still won't stop crying when he's hungry. He gets that from you. Kaylin laughed, and the sound still surprised me, still warmed me. I had spent months learning all the ways he could laugh, all the ways he could smile, all the ways he loved. "I have something for you," he said. "Consider it an anniversary gift." Anniversary? 1 year ago today, a broken Omega walked into my courtyard with my dying son in her arms and changed everything. I thought it was worth commemorating. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring. Silver metal twisted with gold, set with a stone that glowed like captured moonlight. "It was my mother's," he said. "She told me once that I would know when I met the woman who deserved it. She said my wolf would recognize her. My soul would recognize her." He slipped the ring onto my finger. "I didn't recognize you at first," he admitted. "I was too lost in grief, too blind with rage. But my wolf knew. From the moment you walked through those gates, holding my son like he was the most precious thing in the world, my wolf knew you were mine." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "Kaylin. I love you, Seren. I love you in ways I didn't know I could love anymore. You brought light back into my world. You gave me back my son. You gave me back myself." I kissed him, soft at first, then deeper, pouring everything I felt into the connection between us. "I love you too," I said against his lips. "My king, my mate, my home." Across the room, Ash laughed at something only he could see. The sun streamed through the windows. The mark on my neck glowed warm and steady. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. That is the story of Seren. An Omega who was cast out to die and found something worth living for in the snow. A mother who wasn't supposed to exist and a queen who wasn't supposed to survive. But she did survive. She loved. She fought. She won. And if you're listening to this and wondering if such things are possible, if the broken can become whole and the lost can be found, I'll tell you what I learned. The Moon Mother doesn't make mistakes. Even the darkest paths lead somewhere. And sometimes, the thing that saves you is the very thing the world said would destroy you. Now I want to ask you, if you were in her place, would you have picked up the dying baby? Would you have risked everything for a stranger in the snow? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.